Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. The Vatican says that Pope Francis died of a stroke and heart failure. Also shared was the Pontiff's final testament, which included his wish to be buried in the ground in Rome's Basilica of St. Mary Major and not in the Vatican. Officials in Palestine have reported that a Gaza ceasefire deal has been proposed by Qatari and Egyptian mediators. Reports suggest it proposes a truce of between 5 and 7 years, with the release of all hostages and a complete Israeli military withdrawal. Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed bilateral talks with Ukraine for the first time since the early days of the war. It comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is eager to discuss a halt on attacks to civilian targets. US Vice President J.D. Vance and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hold bilateral talks at the PM's residence, with discussions over a new and modern trade agreement. Vance continues his India visit today, which has seen him travel to Amber Fort this morning. Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is heading to Saudi Arabia for a landmark 2-day visit following invitations from the Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister. Defence, energy and investment ties are expected to be discussed. US President Donald Trump has backed Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth over a second reported Yemen strike signal chat leak. Meanwhile, the White House has denied reports that it is looking to replace Hegseth amid the controversy. Harvard has sued to block US President Donald Trump from freezing $2.3 billion in federal funding. The university had rejected a list of White House demands after Trump's administration said that the university allowed anti-Semitism on campus. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and his New Zealand counterpart Christopher Luxon are expected to strengthen security and defence ties at a meeting later today. A new joint defence partnership is set to be announced in pursuit of peace and stability. We start off today with US Vice President J.D. Vance, who has met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as they've hailed progress in trade talks during Vance's visit to New Delhi. Both leaders aim to finalise a deal within the 90-day pause on steep US tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump. Vance, on a 4-day visit with his family, met Modi to discuss trade, energy, defence and strategic technology cooperation, while also addressing shared concerns over China. The visit comes amid an intensifying US-China trade war, with India navigating a careful diplomatic path. Both sides called for diplomacy in addressing global issues. India, facing potential tariffs on major exports, is pushing to finalise the deal by autumn. US officials cited a lack of trade reciprocity, while India is open to cutting tariffs on half of its US imports. With bilateral trade hitting $129 billion in 2024, India seeks a fair agreement with its largest trading partner. Vance and Prime Minister Modi unveiled the terms of reference for a US-India bilateral trade agreement, a significant step following their February 2025 discussions. This agreement aims to reduce trade barriers, including India's high tariffs and regulatory restrictions, which have led to a $45.7 billion US goods trade deficit with India in 2024. The US seeks increased market access and a fairer trade relationship, while India is open to further tariff reductions. This agreement is a key part of President Trump's America First trade policy, aiming at boosting US jobs, growth and long-term benefits for American workers and industries. Additionally, Vance was accompanied by his wife Usha and their children. Vance visited New Delhi's Ashkardam Temple before heading to Jaipur and the Taj Mahal. Modi later hosted the family for dinner at his residence. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Professor Rohan Gunaratne, a Middle East affairs expert who is joining us from Singapore. Rohan, thank you ever so much for joining us. With these trade talks and other topics discussed, how significant is this meeting between Vance and also Prime Minister Narendra Modi, looking at global tensions amid ongoing trade tussles?
President Trump sent the right man to India to engage Modi because Vance is very familiar with India because of his wife's heritage. And there was excellent chemistry. And I believe that the India partnership with the United States will grow from strength to strength. If there was no such dialogue, if there was no such discussion, then of course India would have broadened its strategic partnerships, including with Russia and with Iran. So what we are seeing is that because of this timely dialogue, there will be agreement and discussion on tariffs, US tariffs with regard to India, and that relationship will become a stronger relationship. Other than that, there was many other discussions on science and technology, on defense, on investment, and a broad range of domains. So I believe that this visit is timely, and this visit will pave the way for further strengthening US-India cooperation.
Yes, Professor Gunaratne. Also looking at some of the visuals we've seen of JD Vance, his wife Usha, and their children in India. What is the significance of this visit given Usha Vance's heritage? Of course, she became the first Second Lady of American Asian descent, and she is here, of course, with her children on an extended visit.
The early 21st century, the Indians as a community has done brilliantly in the Western world. Today, many of them occupy key positions in the private sector as well as increasingly in government. And certainly the visit of the wife and the children cements that partnership between India and the United States. And I believe that it will also provide a lot of insight in the American people will understand India better, because as you know, less than 20% of the Americans have traveled outside the United States. So I think that this visit, especially with Vice President's family, will open the door for more tourism, more trade, more partnership, more trust between these two countries.
Yes, Professor Gunaratne as well. Of course, the global uncertainty. There are conflicts ongoing, humanitarian crises. How could the US and India potentially work together on the ongoing geopolitical instability?
The US and India are very strong countries, both these countries. Of course, America is 10 to 20 years ahead of India. But Indians can learn a lot from this partnership, and they can work together to mitigate conflicts. And also this friendship will pave the way for America to think more strategically of issues, global issues, because the ideology of India is dharmic, and the ideology of the Americans are Abrahamic. So I believe that the meeting of these two ideologies will make India and the United States both stronger nations.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Gunaratne, for joining us there and providing your insight. We now head over to Megha Sharma, our executive editor at NewsX World, for some more information. Megha, thank you for joining us. What more can you tell us about these conversations that have been had and what we can expect today for the rest of Vance's visit here in India?
Yes, I think the heavy lifting that had to be done during the 4-day visit of the Vice President of United States of America has already been done, as we saw those visuals that had come in of the meeting of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi having that informal conversation with J.D. Vance, who was accompanied by his wife, the second lady Usha Vance, as well as their 3 children. And the number one highlight of that conversation was the terms of reference that have now been signed for the bilateral trade agreement. Now, this is since 13th of February 2025, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi headed to White House in Washington, D.C. to meet the newly elected President of America, Donald Trump. This is after that there have been a number of trade level representatives who have been speaking with each other from both sides. And now J.D. Vance coming in over here, having that chat with the Prime Minister of the country and signing that terms of reference. What it says is that terms of reference are now going to become the roadmap for the mutually beneficial sector-wise bilateral trade agreement between both the countries. Now, the issue, the point of concern that the American administration has had with India was about the heavy tariffs that have been leveled by India when it comes to importing American products. And if you take a look at the numbers, there's trade to the tune of $130 billion that happens between India and America, out of which there is a trade deficit of about $46 billion that United States incurs when it imports a number of goods and services from India into its territory. And there has in fact been in this detailed statement that has been released by J.D. Vance's office, it mentions that when it comes to the total trade, average trade, the trade tariffs, India ends up levying a trade tariff of about 13%. Vis-a-vis, when you take a comparison and take a look at what America does, there's a levy of just about 3.3% of that trade tariff on Indian goods and services. Again, taking a look at the agricultural products that are exchanged between both the countries through trade, India levies a trade tariff of about 39% for a number of its agricultural produce being exported to America, as compared to the American tariffs that are imposed to the tune of about 3.9%. So these are the causes of concern, these are the causes of worry that the Trump administration wants to balance out with India in the talks that have continued since Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington, D.C. in February this year. And this obviously is again a landmark moment where the significant parlays that have happened between both the countries with regards to trade and tariffs have been taken to the next level, where a roadmap has been built. And the idea is to not just focus on the tariffs that are leveled by India, but also on the other regulations, trade restrictions on goods and services and investments that Americans then get dissuaded from investing in India because of those high rates and restrictions and the other trade barriers that India imposes. So all in all, that was the key highlight of the day yesterday. Today it's a more of a semi-official visit for J.D. Vance, because he's here with his family. There is a family wedding that J.D. Vance and his wife and the children are going to be attending later in the evening. He's at this point of time residing in Rambagh Palace, an iconic heritage structure of Jaipur. There is going to be, after he finishes off his visit to Amer Fort, where I am standing right now, he is going to head back to his hotel after a lunch break. He is going to be holding a lecture. He's going to talk about India-US trade ties, India-US bilateral and diplomatic relations, and there are a select set of dignitaries, scholars, academics who have been invited to participate in this lecture.
Megha Sharma, thank you very much for joining us from a rather windy Jaipur. We will, of course, continue to bring you all of the updates from J.D. Vance's visit today. at Amer Fort and elsewhere as we get them. But moving on now, and in a significant diplomatic development, Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is set to embark on a 2-day visit to Saudi Arabia beginning today. The visit aims to deepen bilateral ties between New Delhi and Riyadh, with key areas of focus being energy, defence, trade and Saudi Arabia's ambitious $100 billion investment plan for India. This will be Modi's third visit to Saudi since holding office. Modi will hold high-level talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Several crucial MOUs are expected to be signed, including one on green hydrogen, signalling a push towards sustainable energy cooperation. Earlier, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri highlighted that both nations are looking to infuse a strategic dimension into their energy partnership. He also said that both countries are working to strengthen their defence ties by planning more joint military exercises and professional cooperation between their armed forces. The leaders are also expected to discuss the implementation of the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor and exchange views on pressing global issues, including the Israel-Hamas conflict and the war in Ukraine. The visit marks a pivotal moment in the Indo-Saudi relations as the two countries seek to transform their strong partnership into a long-term strategic alliance. We move on now, and Pope Francis has died following a stroke and heart failure, the Vatican have announced, prompting mourning across the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. Global leaders and faithful have paid tribute to the pontiff, remembered for his humility, compassion and interfaith outreach. Meanwhile, cardinals will meet today to plan his funeral, expected between the 25th of April and the 27th of April, with world leaders, including Donald Trump, expected to attend. The progressive pontiff, known for championing the poor and clashing with traditionalists, wished to be buried at the Basilica of St. Mary Major. A conclave to elect his successor is likely after May the 6th, with 135 cardinals set to be eligible for the vote. His body will lie in state at St. Peter's Basilica from the 23rd of April, following initial respects at his Santa Marta residence. Tributes are pouring in from world leaders following the death of Pope Francis. US President Donald Trump announced he and First Lady Melania will attend Pope Francis's funeral in Rome, sharing the news on his social media platform. Trump also announced an executive order to lower flags to half-mast following Pope Francis's death, calling him a good man who worked hard and loved the world at the Easter egg roll. Here is what Trump said.
Just signed an executive order putting the flags of our country, all of them, all federal flags and state flags, at half-mast in honor of Pope Francis. So he was a good man, worked hard, he loved the world, and it's an honor to do that.
Meanwhile, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and First Lady Janja will attend Pope Francis's funeral in Rome. Lula declared 7 days of national mourning, calling Francis a voice of respect and welcome. He expressed sorrow over the Pope's death and said the mourning honours Francis's legacy and impact on humanity across the globe. Meanwhile, Argentine President Javier Milei will also attend Pope Francis's funeral in Rome, leading Argentina's delegation. The funeral's date is yet to be confirmed. Milei, who declared 7 days of mourning, shared a tribute on social media, honouring the Pope's wisdom and kindness. Flags will fly at half-mast in Argentina as well. Well, joining us to discuss the developments that we've had from the Vatican and the continued period of mourning being felt across the world is Spencer Critchley, a democratic communication strategist from California. Spencer, thank you ever so much for joining us, as so much of the world continues to mourn but also celebrate Pope Francis's life. We had the news of what it was that led to the pontiff's passing. For you personally, looking at Pope Francis's life, what will he be remembered most for?
I think he's likely to be remembered for what he set out to do as his mission, which was to actually emulate the life of Jesus as well as his namesake, St. Francis of Assisi. And in both cases, that meant emphasizing the central message of Jesus, which was love. At times, if you read the New Testament of the Christian Bible, Jesus almost gets exasperated with his followers when they're constantly asking him to explain arcane details of his teachings, and he says, look, basically this comes down to love. And I think that we saw that in Pope Francis's life, emulating that message of being a humble servant of people instead of a grand leader over them. He lived a life of poverty, drove around in a very small car, did away with the fancy jewels and fancy clothes, and expressed concern for migrants, as Jesus did for the stranger among us. Also expressed deep concern for the environment and all the creatures of the world, as did St. Francis. In some ways, though, that also made him very controversial. Certainly here in the United States, there is a strong right wing of the Catholic Church in the United States, and many of them dislike this Pope intensely because they reject the liberalizing tendencies of the modern world, essentially. This is part of the reaction against liberalism broadly. To me, I think it's telling that they were angry at a person who, as I say, was fulfilling his mission to actually emulate Jesus, the creator of the church they themselves claim to serve.
Yes, Spencer, we are unfortunately running shorter on time, but just to finish our discussion, of course, as much of the world is in mourning, preparations for Pope Francis's funeral, and then his successor will start in the coming days. What do you think the next Pope will need to do to continue the work that Pope Francis carried out, as you said, that may have caused some divide, but stayed true with his morals and his aims throughout his 12 years as the pontiff?
Well, I don't think too many of us can have too much insight into the process, but I would speculate from the outside that there will probably be some kind of doctrinal struggle, because it's not only in the United States, but in Rome and around the Catholic world that there is this deep disagreement about the modernizing trend that began with Vatican II many years ago, versus going back to the conservative version of the Catholic Church. And so I imagine this could be a turning point for the Church, either a continuation of the legacy of Pope Francis or a veering away from it, and in fact even a reversal back towards the past.
Spencer Critchley, thank you ever so much for joining us, providing your insights and your words there. Of course, as the mourning continues, the messages from world leaders continue to pour in for Pope Francis, and celebrating his life, we will be across all of those. We move on now and we head to the Middle East, and a significant development is being observed in the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. Mediators from Qatar and Egypt have proposed a new ceasefire plan aiming to bring an end to months, if not years, of violence in Gaza. According to a senior Palestinian official, the deal includes a longer truce lasting between 5 and 7 years, the release of all Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, and a complete Israeli military withdrawal from Gaza. Hamas has signalled a major shift, saying it's ready to hand over governance of Gaza to a nationally and regionally agreed Palestinian entity, possibly the Palestinian Authority. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected any role for the PA and insists the war will only end with Hamas's destruction. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes have continued across Gaza, reportedly killing 7 more civilians and destroying multiple homes. About 24 living hostages and the bodies of more than 30 others are believed to still be in Gaza, according to Israeli officials. Moving now to Europe, and in a major shift since the start of the Ukraine-Russia war, Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed bilateral talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The offer comes as the US, Ukraine and key European allies gather in London to push for an unconditional ceasefire. Putin said Russia remains open to discussions and emphasised avoiding strikes on civilian targets. The Kremlin clarified that bilateral talks could cover these issues directly with Kyiv. Let's listen in to the Russian president.
С этим нужно разобраться. Это все предмет для такого тщательного исследования. Может быть, и в двустороннем порядке. В результате дела мы этого не исключаем. Так что мы все это проанализируем и будем принимать соответствующие решения. Что касается предложения не бить по объектам гражданской инфраструктуры, с этим надо разобраться. Ну, например, вот всем хорошо известен удар наших вооруженных сил по Конгресс-центру, по-моему, Сумского университета. Гражданский это объект или нет? Гражданский. Но там проходило награждение тех, кто совершил преступления в Курской области.
Well, President Zelensky in his nightly address confirmed Ukraine is ready for dialogue, but insisted Moscow must commit to ending attacks on civilians. This follows repeated ceasefire violations, including during Russia's proposed Easter truce, which Ukraine claims was breached over 1,000 times. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and special Trump envoys will meet top officials from France, Germany, the UK and Ukraine in London this week to move negotiations forward. Moving on now, and in a major crackdown on transnational crime, the US Justice Department has charged 27 alleged members of the Venezuela's Tren de Aragua gang under the powerful RICO Act. This is a federal law designed to dismantle organised crime networks. It's the first time RICO charges have been brought against members of the violent gang, which originated in Venezuelan prisons. The suspects are accused of murder, sex trafficking and drug crimes across multiple states. The charges come as part of President Donald Trump's intensified crackdown on foreign gangs following his campaign pledge to combat illegal immigration and gang violence. Earlier this year, the Trump administration designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organisation. In March, the president invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport hundreds of alleged gang members directly to El Salvador's high-security Seacot prison, bypassing normal legal procedures. That is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.